In my community, I belong to a Punjabi community. A guy was working in a store. A homeless guy went into the store, threatened him with some weapon.
Yes.
And after that, the guy who was at the store at that time working there, he grabbed his weapon.
Baseball bat, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
Then he hit him. After that,
Yeah, he was charged. 5 armed men entered his home. He was a legal gun owner. His firearm was legally stored, so he was not doing anything illegal vis-a-vis the actual gun that was used, and he shot and killed one of the intruders.
How somebody will know that 5 men are carrying a gun right now?
Friends was recently attacked in his own home and was forced to defend his wife and his children. It was a horrific attack where a gun actually went off and grazed the top of his head.
I start observing a unique pattern where Canadians start losing their trust in police.
Yeah, cops that are racist, cops that beat people up, cops that hide evidence, cops that plant evidence, cops that steal people's money. Like, there are bad police officers. Young teenagers coming home from school or basketball practice or jobs, and the police were roughing them up and searching them and harassing them. So that trust never existed.
How you personally felt when Toronto police officers said that hand over your car keys if somebody broke into your house because they have real guns? What if you have to protect your family in life and death situation? What if the very system which meant to protect you turn against you? These aren't just the hypothetical questions. These are the actual incidents which we discussed in our latest podcast. Today I sat down with one of the most brilliant legal minds in Canada, Jordana Godlist. She's a criminal defense lawyer who had fought some of the toughest and most controversial cases in Canada. So let's jump into the podcast with one and only Jordana Godlist at Lush Podcast, where experience flows. Jordana Godlist, welcome to Avilash Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Finally,
After 3 months, sir.
I know we've been trying to coordinate our schedules now for quite some time, but you're here now. Welcome to my office. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Perfect. So you tell me how we crack the ice for when it comes to Canadian criminal law.
How we crack the ice.
Yeah.
Canadian criminal law is, it's complicated. I know that we are often compared with what's happening in the States, and our system is very, very different in a lot of respects. Obviously, there's similarities in terms of what's legal, what's illegal, but when it comes to procedure, it's completely different. I know oftentimes we're bombarded in the news by American criminal law cases, what's happening. Everyone right now is tuned into this, situation that P. Diddy finds himself into. But the process here is very different, and our bail system is very different, completely different than what happens in the States, which means what we see on TV, right? A lot of people think that what they watch on television translates to the Canadian criminal system, and it's almost night and day, completely different. So bail is different, and sentencing is much different. So those are really the 3 main areas that are important for people to understand if they want to understand Canadian criminal law.
You said it very beautifully, because when it comes to law, then the first thing came into my mind is like Better Call Saul.
Right. Or Law and Order.
Exactly.
Everybody thinks it's Law and Order. They're like, but I don't understand. What do you mean it takes 3 years to get my case done? Law and Order, they do it in an hour.
Exactly.
Like, no.
So what make a more serious and less serious crime when it comes to Canadian criminal law?
So when it comes to things like bail and the type of case you're going to have, whether it's just going to go before a judge or it's going to go in front of a judge and jury, obviously the most serious crimes in criminal law in Canada are murder. Attracts the highest sentences. So first degree murder is an automatic life sentence with no parole for 25 years. That is the most stringent sentence you can receive in all of Canada. That is the worst sentence you can possibly have. Second degree murder is also an automatic life sentence. Parole eligibility is a minimum of 10 years and a maximum of 25 years. And then, it goes down from there. Manslaughter, attempted murder, firearms offenses, guns right now in Ontario especially are taken extremely serious. In different provinces, they're treated a little bit differently. Obviously, in the more conservative provinces, there's a bit more of an appetite for firearm possessions that we don't have here in Ontario. Drugs are obviously something that's taken very seriously. Sexual assault is taken very seriously. And then on the low end of the spectrum, you have things like mischief, destroying someone's property is not taken as seriously. A simple assault, two people are involved in a bar fight, it's less serious. It's a little more serious if it's a man hitting a woman. Domestic violence is taken very seriously. So it really depends. There's a continuum of crimes from low end, which would never receive a penitentiary sentence, to, murder being the most extreme.
Okay, when you say third degree murder and second degree murder.
Yes, first and second. Yeah.
First and second? Okay.
Yes.
So if you have to explain it to someone like me who has zero knowledge,
Yes.
how you will explain that?
So if you kill someone while you're doing something illegal, but you didn't mean for them to die, that's manslaughter. Okay? If you do something and someone die, you kill someone and you meant to kill them, that's second degree murder.
Okay.
If you kill someone and you meant to kill them and the killing was planned and deliberate, or in the course of a sexual assault, or in the course of a forcible confinement, or you kill a police officer, it's first degree murder. And the intention, while, in simplest terms, if you mean to kill someone, it also includes if you mean to cause them significant bodily harm and you're reckless as to whether or not they die. So if, for example, you don't mean to kill me, you just want to hurt me and you fire a gun at me and you hit me, anywhere and I die as a result, if you meant to inflict that gunshot wound to me, you're meaning to cause significant bodily harm and you don't care whether I die. And that would allow a conviction for murder with the intention to kill someone. So there's nuances and complications, but in the simplest of sort of explanations, if you mean to kill someone, it's second degree murder and it's elevated to first on those four situations.
There's a very thin line in between second and first degree.
Yeah, so first degree is only if the Crown can prove that the murder was planned and deliberate. So if, I don't know, you and I are in a nightclub together and I push you over because I'm trying to get to the bar and you don't like that I've pushed you and you suddenly pull out a gun and you shoot me, there's really no planning and deliberation. You do that suddenly, you do that out of the blue, you've already got the gun on you. Take that same situation, I push you at the bar, but your gun's in the car. And you think, fuck this chick, I'm gonna kill her. And you go out to the car and you get the gun. And of course, surveillance cameras everywhere that nobody thinks of anymore, but you're caught on surveillance camera and you check and you rack it and you make sure that it's loaded and you conceal it and you stand outside the bar and you wait for me to come out because you're not going to pass security with the gun, but you wait for me to come out. And let's say it takes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, and you're sitting there waiting. And as soon as I walk out of the bar, you walk up and you shoot me. You've now had the time to think and you've now had the time to plan, even though it was a shitty plan.
Yeah.
But you've planned to kill me when I come out of that bar, that would be first degree murder.
Well, it's not personally me, okay?
Absolutely not. But that's the difference. So that's where planning and deliberation comes in. And then the other three are self-explanatory. You can kill someone suddenly, but if you're killing a police officer, it's first degree murder. If someone is killed during the course of them being sexually assaulted, whoever's sexually assaulted them and killed them, it's first degree murder. And then forcible confinement means you've tied someone up or you've enclosed them in a room or a car, and they die during the course of that struggle.
Okay. Related to that,
Yes.
let me ask you a real incident.
Okay.
A man shot an intruder who break into a house.
Yes.
And under self-defense in BC.
Yes.
And after that,
happened here in Ontario, in Milton.
okay. Then after that, there are two public opinions.
Okay.
One said it was heroic to save for the family.
Yes.
And second said whether the use of force was necessary.
Right.
What is your opinion on that as a lawyer?
So I mean, I've spoken with the gentleman many times out in Milton. He reached out to me, and it was a tragic situation. 5 armed men entered his home. Him and his mother were home. His father had passed away. Sort of recently, he was the man of the house. He was a legal gun owner. His firearm was legally stored, so he was not doing anything illegal vis-a-vis the actual gun that was used, and he shot and killed one of the intruders. He was arrested for murder. It took, I think, 4 or 5 months for him to be released from jail. Finally got out, and fast forward, I don't know, 9 or 10 months, maybe a year, the Crown eventually dropped the charges against him. Thank God. Because it's horrendous to think that you are at home, which according to the law, your house is your castle. You should feel safe in your house. And in fact, when people commit break and enters into someone's home, it's treated more seriously than if you break into a business, for example.
Really?
Yes. So the law recognizes that your home is your castle and people should feel safe in their home and protected in their home. And so the notion that we cannot protect ourselves and our family in our own home, which the law recognizes should be your safety net, I think is abhorrent. You know, as a legal gun owner, and I'm not quiet about it, we should be able to protect ourselves in our own home, provided that we are following the rules and regulations of legal gun ownership.
Definitely. When you said that if somebody broke into a house as compared to a business,
Yes.
it is different. So
Yes.
can you explain how different it is?
Your sentence would be different. So the law punishes people more for breaking into a private dwelling than a business, because a business is just, it's business. You know, as a business owner, it's shitty, but you call your insurance company and they replace whatever you have, and assuming nobody's there, nobody's been hurt. It's more commercial in nature.
Okay.
But the intrusion of a person breaking into a private home, especially if someone's home, right? It's considered a home invasion. So the sentencing regime around break and enters into private dwellings, which colloquially we call home invasions,
Okay.
are much more severe.
Okay. The reason I asked you this question because in my community, I belong to a Punjabi community.
Yes.
So there was a recent incident which was very popular. A sick guy was working in a store. A homeless guy does not actually break into,
Yep.
but he went into the store, maybe tried to threaten him with some weapon.
Yes.
And after that gentleman, the guy who was at the store at that time working there,
Yeah.
he grabbed his weapon.
Baseball bat, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
Then he hit him. After that,
Yeah.
he
He was charged with aggravated assault.
okay.
Not?
Yeah, it was actually.
Yes,
Yeah.
I remember.
So if you already have, so can you provide some inputs about that case?
I mean, I wasn't on it. I don't know enough about it. But again, you know, someone who's defending himself and his property, the question is, was the force excessive? Right? Because at the end of the day, our self-defense laws allow us to defend ourselves, but only in proportion to the perceived threats. So if someone breaks into your house and they're about to leave, you know, you can't shoot them in the back while they're on the front porch, leaving your house, because the threat has been neutralized now. So the force that you are allowed to use is only what is reasonable in the circumstances given the threat posed to you, right?
Okay,
and so if the police believe that the force used was excessive, they have a duty to press charges.
Okay. So in that very example, if I come to the home invasion example, as you said,
Yes.
happened in Milton, I believe.
Yes.
How somebody will know, because if somebody break into a house, it will be in mid of a night. How somebody will know that 5 men are carrying a gun right now?
Well, I mean, it depends on the home, right? Some homes are equipped with surveillance. Some people wake up. There's been one of my friends was recently attacked in his own home and was forced to defend his wife and his children. It was a horrific attack where a gun actually went off and grazed the top of his head. Only by the grace of God is he okay. So, yeah, it's frightening. So how did he know? He woke up and he looked downstairs and he saw armed intruders in his house.
Okay.
So it really depends, but that's how people would know.
Okay. As we're talking about a self-defense law here,
Yes.
let me ask you a question. When it comes to safety of a woman,
Yes.
let's say a woman is under attack and she protected herself by using a pepper spray. And after that, will there be any consequences for carrying and using a pepper spray, even though she had protected herself?
Right. So, I mean, again, it really depends on the specifics. If she's at home and she just has pepper spray at home and someone comes in and is attacking her and it's clear to the police then when they arrive that she was under attack and that this person doesn't belong in the house, that the police have to make a judgment call as to whether or not she's charged. She could be. And then it becomes a question of what the Crown does with a case like that, right? Because ultimately, the Crown will decide whether or not they want to continue on in the prosecution. And in a situation like that, depending on which Crown ends up with the file, they may recognize, no, this is a clear case of self-defense and we're going to stay the charges. So whether or not it proceeds to an actual trial requires, one, what the police decide to do in that particular circumstance, because the police get calls constantly. And they have to make a judgment call as to whether or not they press charges or they don't.
Okay.
There are certain policies that require them to press charges. So, for example, if a woman calls and makes a complaint that she has been assaulted in a domestic context, they no longer have any jurisdiction to not press charges. And the amount of cases that we get as a result of women calling the police for help but not wanting charges to pursue is unbelievable, because they no longer have a say. As soon as the police get called and show up and a woman makes an allegation of a domestic assault, the police are going to charge the person who she claims attacked her.
So no matter, even after that, she said, no, I don't want to press charges. Okay.
Correct. I have a case right now for a gentleman who the police were called by bystanders who claimed to have seen a fight between him and his girlfriend. The police showed up. The girlfriend said, no, he didn't hit me. I'm fine. We're good here. She has already reported to victim services at the courthouse. Nothing happened. In her police statement, she said, no, I wasn't hit. The Crown is still pursuing.
So what will happen if somebody try to file a false charges against someone?
Happens all the time. It happens all the time. It's actually frightening how often false allegations are laid against men, especially in the context of domestic assaults and sexual assaults.
Okay. Coming back to self-defense now.
Yes.
So what tools Canadian can carry for the purposes of self-defense?
Technically none. If you're carrying any object to be used as a weapon, and that's the purpose by which you're carrying it, technically it's against the law.
So like nothing, eh?
We as Canadians are not allowed to carry weapons.
Not even for self-defense purposes.
We are not allowed to carry weapons. Period. Full stop. As the legal gun owner, I am not allowed to carry my guns.
Okay.
We are not allowed to carry knives for the purposes of being used as a weapon. It's called carrying concealed. So any object that is carried for the purpose of it being a weapon. Period. Full stop.
Okay.
Yes. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't do it. It doesn't mean that, things can't be of dual purpose. Plenty of people carry a knife for utility and as a tool. And obviously, if you have a knife on you, if you get attacked, it can be used in order to defend yourself. So I'm not saying there isn't workarounds, but the reality is our law is clear that we are not supposed to carry anything on us for the purpose of using it as a weapon, because that would be carrying something that is dangerous to the public. And anything that's potentially dangerous to the public can attract a criminal charge. It's called weapons dangerous. So carrying a weapon for a purpose is dangerous to the public.
Okay.
So the law is complicated, because if you use something for the purpose of defending yourself, if you are attacked, then that can be a complete defense to whatever you do.
So now you have to actually prove that you're not carrying it for the defense purposes. It's supposed to be there.
So I know that self-defense is a defense, but you're not allowed to carry a weapon for the purpose of using it as a weapon.
Okay.
So it's complicated.
It's very actually.
It's very complicated. So I know people that carry knives, and like I said, it has a dual purpose. If they use it as a tool or part of their trade, or they need it for something in their day-to-day lives, then it's perfectly legal. As soon as that knife is used as a weapon and is construed as a weapon, they can be arrested.
Okay.
And again, that's subject to whatever bail conditions they have, probation conditions they have, if they're on weapons prohibition. So if anyone is carrying things, they should certainly speak to a lawyer if it's a concern of theirs that what they're doing might be illegal.
Okay. So I like to have your opinion on that. That I start observing a unique pattern where Canadians start losing their trust in police.
I mean, I don't know that Canadians have had trust in police the whole time. You know, anyone who's looked at my background knows sort of where I'm coming from as a teenager, you know, struggling with homelessness and addiction and group homes. My peers never trusted the police. That's the world we came from. I have now spent 15 years defending clients from marginalized and racialized communities that never trusted the police. My clients, you know, were young teenagers coming home from school or basketball practice or jobs, and the police were roughing them up and searching them and harassing them. So that trust never existed. I can't speak to, you know, what private educated elites have felt about the police. I can't speak to what other communities have felt about the police. I think that, you know, the string of police fatalities opened up a lot of people's eyes to police brutality, that people who didn't grow up with that came to recognize through social media, through the proliferation of our cell phone cameras, that people now were stuck actually seeing what many communities complained was happening for decades. You know, police brutality against certain communities is not new. If you trace the history of the prison industrial complex, it was always a response to the end of slavery. And police were tasked with maintaining the status quo. That was sort of the origins of modern day policing and the modern prison industrial complex and the modern criminal justice system. So it's always been predicated on inequalities. And I think that for anyone who's familiar with that history, they've recognized that some communities have never trusted the police, and for a good reason. I think it's unfortunate when there have continually been police officers who have lived up to that reputation, when I'm in no way suggesting that every officer behaves in that mentality and every officer becomes a police officer in order to continue that status quo. But when we talk about public's distrust, that's only, you know, the privileged members of society who never had to experience what other members of society have been complaining about legitimately for decades.
Okay, now coming back to your life, it took me a while, you know, to digest it.
That's fair. No, I think it's a really complicated topic. I think that, you know, social media made it popular to complain about the police. Black Lives Matter as a movement made it popular to complain about the police. The benefit of Black Lives Matter was that it opened a lot of people's eyes to what had been going on for a very long time. But the distrust in police, I don't think is anything new. You know, if I lived it 30 years ago, before there was iPhones, before there was social media, when it was just marginalized, racialized communities, impoverished communities, people were living in certain subsects of society that the police just used, abused, and took advantage of. So I don't think that police conduct has worsened, if that's what you're asking. I think there have always been good cops and bad cops. And I think the bad cops taint the good cops for those who experience them. And I think those who are raised in communities where the good cops patrol are blind to what is happening to the rest of society.
Okay, when you say good and bad cops, do you have any example for the bad cops? Like they might
Certainly,
be doing something?
Yeah, cops that are racist, cops that beat people up, cops that hide evidence, cops that plant evidence, cops that steal people's money. Like, there are bad police officers. I mean, we see it often in the news. We have repeatedly heard about officers who are being arrested and breaking the law. Like, I can't imagine living in a greater hypocrisy than being someone who is paid by the public to enforce the law only to break the law for your own personal gain, right? I can't imagine a greater hypocrisy than that, other than politicians who do the same, but it's all in the same vein when it comes to policing. And then there are some amazing cops. There are cops who became police officers because they actually want to help the community and they want to make our communities better and safer, and they want to try to help people. And I've met police officers that really is what they want to do, and they do everything they can to try to strengthen communities, and they recognize what the historical inequities have been in law enforcement and in the criminal justice system, and they become police officers because they want to change that. So there are good cops and there are bad cops, but I can understand, again, with some of my background and the last 15 years representing people who had never grown up with good cops and had only been subjected to treatment from bad policing, why there's zero trust in any police officer. That I have clients who, when they see that uniform, it invokes in them a fear and an anger that when you understand where they're coming from and what life has been in relation to police, why that would be. And so when you talk about, the public now becoming distrustful, no, I think that the public who never had to experience bad policing or street level policing is now waking up to what certain communities have been talking about for a very long time.
Okay. When you say that cops sometimes manipulate the evidence, do you have any example or any case?
Yes, of course. There's plenty of cases where the police have stolen evidence, where the police have planted evidence. There have been large projects that have fallen apart because police have been caught stealing. There was that huge gambling, that huge casino up in Markham. Mm-hmm. Massive police investigation, hundreds of police officers involved, and the whole case fell apart because one or two cops decided they were going to steal some luxury watches. Only they stole the watches after the forensic team had come through and taken photographs.
No way.
Yeah. So there was photographs of the watches. The watches were never lodged in evidence, and when the photos of the evidence were displayed, the watches were nowhere to be found. And so the Crown had to stay all of the charges. It was like a multi-million-dollar gambling ring. I think that's one of the most recent, famous extreme examples, but I have it all of the time. I think that if I had to put a number on it, I'd say at least 75, if not 80% of clients that I've represented on drug trafficking charges have told me that the money which is taken from them and lodged into evidence is far less than what they actually had. I've had clients that have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because the police raided and took their money. And there's no benefit to them to telling me this, time and time again, right? Because at the end of the day, if there's no record of it and we can't prove it and there's no photos to show how much money was actually taken, like there have been cases that you're able to prove it, but most of the time you can't. Money's gone, it's gone. And so there's no benefit to the client telling me these cops stole my money. Right, if we can't do anything about it within the context of the case. And so we flag that and try to look for it and try to prove it. But it happens again and again and again. Too often for it to just be, coincidence.
Yeah, as you're explaining this, my mind is still stuck to that watches case, Forensic tape took a picture. 10-year-old kid said, don't do it. You were caught.
Yeah, listen, one team took the photo and the other team came through, and
they're like
I said, there's there's always one or two bad apples. And so someone decided to help themselves to luxury. I think they were APs, so.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. No, they were significant watch pieces, for sure. And so
I love it.
Just couldn't help himself, I guess. I don't know. Silly.
No, because you have your gun as well. You have licensed gun.
Yes.
And you love cars as well.
I do love cars, yes.
Yep. So what is, first of all, something called Melanoma Canada?
Melanoma Canada.
Yeah, what is that?
Melanoma Canada is a charity organization.
Okay.
So melanoma is a type of skin cancer, and Melanoma Canada is an organization that aims to educate Canadians and try to promote better skin care and also to raise money for people who are struggling and attempting to find cures for melanoma.
Okay.
So it's a type of skin cancer. So I do volunteer work with them. Every year they throw a huge car show on Father's Day. It's in conjunction with the Yorkville Exotic Car Show, and all of the proceeds go to Melanoma Canada. So I've been doing that. I did that last year, and then I think 2 or 3 years before that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That is the reason why this question came in as well. When I was doing my research for you.
Oh, you saw the videos of from the York Executive Exotic Car Show. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Fabulous organization. I'll do a quick plug for anyone who's interested. Look them up, donate if you need something to do on Father's Day. Every year, Yorkville gets shut down for an incredible car show. Exotics, classics, American muscle cars. There's something for everybody.
Okay. I think it's fair for me to ask you this question as well, because you love cars and you have guns as well.
Sure.
How you personally felt when Toronto police officers said that hand over your car keys if somebody broke into your house because they have real guns?
I mean, I'm on two minds. For me, it's frustrating because legally I cannot use my guns in self-defense, right? And so here we have Toronto police saying to one of many legal gun owners, let people with illegal guns who are breaking the law by carrying the illegal gun, let them come into your house, and don't use your legal firearms to protect yourself and your property, even though the law says you can defend yourself and your property, and just hand over the property that you've worked so hard to achieve. It's frustrating, to say the least. It's not the message that I think should be delivered. That said, I've seen what happens when people don't turn over their property and they're unarmed. So the police are stuck. We have a government that is allowing the proliferation of firearms on the streets of this country because they are focused on legal gun owner instead of illegal gun ownership. So they've decided to spend billions chasing after law-abiding citizens and trying to take away our guns, and have allowed for a situation where gun violence is rampant in every major city in this country. It's a frustrating situation. The police are doing what they can. They wanted to keep people safe. They obviously can't. They don't have the manpower to guard every community, and they're sort of helpless, which is a sad state of affairs. So from the police perspective, they don't want to see homeowners get shot over a vehicle that's insured. And do I think the message was wrong? Yes. As a law-abiding citizen and gun owner and owner of exotic cars, does that bother me? Of course. But until the government does something to correct our laws and to correct our borders, this is the situation we're all forced in.
Okay. Surprisingly, I was reading this survey recently when I was doing a research for the podcast as well.
Yes.
It says since pandemic,
Yes.
there is a 50% increase in car thefts,
Yep.
24% increase in firearm offenses, and 23% increase in robbery.
Yes.
So what do you think, according to Canadian law, what is the prime reason for that? Is it a law?
Well, it's
itself?
not a law problem. It's a society problem. And the problem is COVID changed the landscape financially for many people. Some people did very well and got very wealthy, and some people lost everything. We had a situation where youth were being forced into their homes and not allowed out. We have, as a result of the lockdowns, and we have a government that handed $2,000 a month to people who had never seen $2,000 a month before. And those people spent their money, some of them, in ways that allowed for the proliferation of guns and drugs to flood this market in ways that a lot of us had never seen before. So you had sort of low-level drug dealers that were now getting $2,000 a month, and they were saying to their friends, let's put it together. You get 5 friends together, now you've got $10,000. So you're using that $10,000 to buy a larger quantity of cocaine and fentanyl, and now you've got more money because you're doing well. And so when people have money, they're at risk. So now they need guns. And the government doesn't protect our borders. So where there is demand, there will be supply. And when there was a demand for guns, the supply came in, and it comes in from the south. So So we have a situation right now where I assume when I am meeting any male of any race or ethnicity between the ages of 17 to 30, I assume he has a gun.
70.
That's how bad Toronto has come. I think, and I'm sure I'm tainted by what I do and what I see, but the assumption for me is when I'm talking to someone in that demographic, in that age range, that they're armed. And I don't mean that in a bad way, and it doesn't scare me, and it doesn't mean that I treat people differently, but there are so many guns on the street, I just assume that whomever I'm speaking to has one, and it doesn't surprise me when they do.
Well, I don't.
Again, it wouldn't faze me, because the people that come into my office that are facing gun charges are not the people 10 years ago that I would have assumed. I'm people that do not look like they are even in the lifestyle that would require them to have a gun, and they just have them.
Okay.
And it's because they believe that everyone is armed. And so this belief that if everyone's armed, I need to be armed in order to protect myself. It has created this need, this demand, and where there's demand, like I said, there's supply. And so you have, the floodgates on firearms have opened up in Toronto. There's so many guns. It's I don't even know. And so yes, and then we have people who are struggling to afford even their basic needs. So robberies have increased. Carjackings increased as a result of, during the pandemic, and you've tied it to the pandemic, I don't know if you remember, there was no supply on cars.
Definitely.
The waiting lists were 9 months.
After
to get
that,
a car.
there was a shortage of silicon chips.
There was a shortage of everything during COVID. COVID caused this need. And so people started stealing them and revending them and selling them. And so anyone looking for a car would, jump on Kijiji, and now all of a sudden you can get a Range Rover for $50,000. Well, you walk into Range Rover, you can't buy a Range Rover even if you wanted to spend triple that, right? There was no supply on Range Rovers. So that created part of the demand and part of the increase in carjackings. And then, of course, the global market opened up. And so once the global market opened up and there was a need for these types of vehicles overseas, organized crimes organizations just recognized, wow, this is a good business here. I mean, the tow truck industry was greatly affected. It needed to be replaced by something. And so that's where the carjackings come from, unfortunately.
Surprising fact of that very same report, it said that 90% of the crimes are being committed by 10% of criminals, and those are repeat offenders.
Yes, that doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me at all.
So is this correct for me to say that there is something which is empowering those criminals and encouraging them to do so?
No, there's a lack of hope. There's a lack of resources. There's a lack of proper education. There's a lack of employment opportunities. There is, I say this all the time. It costs around $100,000 to house an inmate in a federal institution. Okay? If you're given any sentence over 2 years, you're sent to a penitentiary, which is considered a federal institution. And the average cost is somewhere around $100,000. If you took that same $100,000 that it costs to house someone for 1 year in a federal institution and moved it to the front end of that person's life, that before the age of 12, when we can get arrested, that same person and that same community had access to proper housing, to, proper counseling, to school systems that actually cared about specific communities. You reinstated lunch programs. You put up basketball courts again. You made sure the kids had what to do before school and after school, and proper mentorship and training for jobs and for volunteer opportunities. If you give someone that, the likelihood of them entering into the criminal justice system would lower significantly. Significantly. I'm not saying we can ever eradicate crime. I don't think you can, but you would see a significant drop. The problem is, once someone enters the criminal justice system, the way that it's designed is to keep people stuck. So as soon as someone turns 12, the police can arrest them. And once they're arrested, they have to go through the system. And most, youth are given to start probation. And depending on what their situation is at home and in their community, they're unlikely to meet the terms of their probation. So they're arrested again. And they're arrested again. They're released on onerous bail conditions. If they can't meet their bail conditions, they're arrested again. Eventually, they're detained. Oftentimes, they don't have the benefit of a lawyer that actually cares about them, tells them to plead guilty. And now they have further probation. They're going to breach. They've now started building up a criminal record. They get arrested again, because again, without the support in the community and changing, the circumstances that led someone to commit that crime in the first place, they're going to go back to it. So maybe they have mental health problems, maybe they have anger management problems, maybe they're dealing with trauma, maybe they're dealing with addiction, maybe they're living in a house that's, subject to extreme domestic violence, and this is the way they cope. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons that have someone pursue criminal activity, but once they start, if they don't have the proper resources and support they need in a holistic approach, they're going to go back. And so, we as a society, we shake our finger at recidivists. Well, why don't we look at why? Right? We obviously frown on 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids that are walking around carrying guns. Well, why do we have communities in this city where a 15-year-old feels like they need a gun to feel safe? That's crazy.
Yep.
And it's not every community, right? We have kids in Rosedale aren't 15 years old and carrying around guns. They feel safe. The kids in Forest Hill feel safe. Most of the kids in Richmond Hill feel safe. So why are the kids in Regent Park and Moss Park and Parkdale carrying guns at 15 years old? What is it about those communities? And so the government needs to look at how we fix the underlying issues that are causing people to enter that system in the first place.
Okay. Very deep answer. So when you was explaining it, I was thinking about that everything is interlinked with each other. When I said people don't trust police, now those communities have a mistrust with police.
Yes.
Eventually mistrust with law.
Yes.
Then mistrust with their own people. And because of the family circumstances of where they are living, they have to carry gun.
Yes.
And government is not doing anything.
Correct. If we don't address the underlying issues, then we are never, ever going to stop this. And it's just going to get worse. And I think COVID made it worse. COVID made people feel very isolated. Like I said, COVID, created situations of extreme impoverishment in some and extreme wealth in others. There are people who got very wealthy during COVID, and those that didn't carry a lot of anger and resentment. And it's created a situation where, I see a lot of disenfranchisement within our communities and a lot of distance, and it's perpetuating the problems for sure.
Okay. It took me a minute to
You
digest
definitely didn't come in for a light chat.
No, actually, so...
These are great questions. They're heavy, they're meaty.
Yeah, definitely, because when you're explaining this, it took me a while to digest it.
Right.
So I was thinking that if I'm in the individual shoes, that how personally I was feeling. So that is the reason I just stepped back a little. I was like, okay.
That's great. That's the point, right? That's what everyone should be doing. What is causing someone to behave in this way? How do we as a society fix this? Because we as a society suffer from it, right? All of us who drive nice cars are at risk of being carjacked. So if we don't want to live in a world where we're scared to drive our nice cars, we need to think about, okay, what can we as a community do to prevent this situation? And we have to take a step back. We have to think, what would drive a 17-year-old kid to commit a carjacking? Well, he's being offered what you and I would probably consider is nothing, a few $1,000s, sometimes $5,000 to do this. Well, why? What else can we do to replace that?
I believe Dubai is the good definition of that because it's a very safe place.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Coming back to real life now. So last year there was a gold container which landed into a Pearson airport, got stolen.
Yes.
Recently, after a year and a half, police arrested 3 individuals.
Yes.
And one of them was found going to a Good Life gym on a very next day. So my question to you is,
yes,
there is a possibility that it's a mistake by police which led to a bad publicity of that individual, or it's a law, Canadian law?
Listen, everyone in Canada who's charged with a criminal offense is presumed to be innocent. Right? Everyone who gets charged. We are all presumed innocent. Anyone who's charged. That's That is the foundation of our justice system, right?
Who judges the judge?
Well, that's my own branding, but the actual state of the law is that everyone is innocent unless and until the Crown can prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the bedrock of the criminal justice system. So if anyone charged with a crime is presumed innocent, then they should not be denied reasonable bail. Why are we keeping presumptively innocent people in jail unless it's of utmost importance, unless they don't have a reasonable plan of bail, unless the Crown has a strong case, unless releasing them would, I'm trying to explain it in like simple terms, unless releasing them would result in them not appearing for court. So people who are flight risk are detained. People who pose a substantial risk to the community would be detained. But absent that, yes, it's Canada's biggest gold heist, but take that away, right? So what is Canada's biggest gold heist? Person's presumed innocent. If they have no criminal record, no other outstanding charges, they're not a flight risk, they're not a threat to the community. If the public wouldn't lose faith in the administration by releasing this person, then they should be released.
Okay.
And so when he goes to the gym, I'd rather go to the gym than, the local strip club, right? Like of all the places he could go, at least he's going somewhere to stay healthy.
Absolutely.
Right? And you're entitled to. If his bail allows him to do that, it's less of a concern. I mean, right now, Instagram is blowing up because that girl who is alleged to have stolen the Porsche from the driver out of his driveway and ran him over, she got released out of Brampton, arrested for another carjacking in Toronto, and today she got released from Toronto, so she's back on the street, which I can't say I'm not a part of this case, but wow. I mean, her lawyer.
Wild.
And it wasn't me, but kudos to the lawyer for having her be released when she's clearly on video, jacking this car. And this poor gentleman who was just trying to sell his car on Kijiji for reasons I'll never understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apparently can't walk.
So I have a follow-up to that. So why police made the public announcement and shows the picture of those individuals? So that won't be considered as bad publicity of that individual because he's being arrested only.
Yes.
He's not found guilty of that crime.
Correct.
So does that lead to a bad publicity of that individual?
Of course it's bad publicity. I don't think, anyone's proud of their mugshot. Again, you can see it from two sides. For the wrongfully accused, it's horrific.
Yep.
Their name is dragged through the mud. Their reputation is destroyed depending on what they're charged with. It can be absolutely decimating for them. From the police perspective, they feel like they have a duty to inform the public.
Mm-hmm.
Public feels like they have the right to know, and it should be a priority to know what's happening in their communities, and whether or not their neighbors involved or the friends involved, or I think it depends on the crime, the position that society takes. If you have, for example, a fraudster and the police kept it a secret and there was potentially other victims out there, people would be mad at the police for not informing the public. So I obviously think it's unfortunate. I do everything that I can to keep my clients out of the media during the course of their trials. There are some cases that just attracts media attention. As you know, I represent one of the girls on the swarming, and from day one, at every single court appearance, the media is there because the public cares about this case. So there are some cases where there's nothing we as the lawyer can do to keep the client out of the media. The police, whether it's to embarrass the person, whether it's to warn the public, whether it's just to provide information to the public, whether it's because this is, everyone loves true crime, right? It's the number one category of entertainment on Netflix and podcasting.
Exactly.
So everybody was itching for it, and the media, at the end of the day, we look at it as a public service. It's not. It's a business. It's a business controlled by the government. So government wants to show that they are doing something about crime because everyone cares about that. And this is a way to do it. Police get to parade photos of all of the people they arrest and say, look what we're doing for your community. Fast forward 3 years, the case collapses because the police have done something wrong, and nobody publishes that, right? The police don't ever publish when their cases fall apart. The media sometimes picks it up, but it's few and far between.
So following to that as well, so now does that individual has a right, if let's say case was going on, later judge found him not guilty, so now that individual has a right to do something about that bad publicity?
Like sue the police? No, because all they say is that this person is alleged to be doing something. Right? If you look at the way that all of these articles are worded, the police are just saying, we arrested this person and they're alleged to be committing drug trafficking, and every single police report and every single media outlet writes, and allegations haven't been proven in court, right? We always see that. They want a comment from the accused, they want a comment from the lawyer, and 9 times out of 10, the lawyer's comment is, we will be vigorously defending these allegations. That's what we say. And that's the attempt to try to do some damage control.
Coming to a most recent case which happened, a Toronto realtor, Anita Mui, was found or has been killed by a prime suspect which has fled the country to Hong Kong. So how you see this case as a lawyer, and according to you, maybe on a personal side or maybe from your professional experience, how justice can be served now?
I mean, I'm not sure that I believe justice is ever served in a courtroom. I don't know that you get justice.
That's a big one.
I don't know that you get justice. Now, I've never had a loved one who's been murdered, so I'm not sure how I would feel. I don't know if her family feels like justice is something that would be served by a judge. They have to find the accused. They have to extradite him, depending on where they find him. We don't know what country is it. We know that he started his journey by flying to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
The government has no idea where he is. He has disappeared from there. So whether he's still in Hong Kong or whether he's gone elsewhere is unknown. If he ends up at some point being apprehended in a country that has extradition agreements with Canada, then Canada can apply to extradite him and bring him back to Canada, where he would face these charges of first-degree murder. And then ultimately it will be up to a judge and jury to decide whether or not he's guilty. I don't know the evidence against him. I have no idea why the police are alleging that he is involved. It's obviously not a case that I'm involved with. The case doesn't even exist right now, right? There's no accused that's been arrested, and therefore there is no case per se. There's a warrant out for his arrest, and if he's located and extradited back to Canada, then he'll have to sort of face the music.
Okay. Now coming back to carjacking once again. It's a bit of a center term.
You like these carjackings, okay?
It seems like now it's a center theme of this whole podcast.
Okay, hey, this is your podcast. You ask me however I can help.
Okay, so for the carjacking, mostly juveniles are the one who are breaking into the houses and jacking up the cars for organized criminals. And I know that juveniles are being treated differently by the law.
Yes.
But how differently?
Very differently. So the Young Offenders Act here was replaced by the Youth Criminal Justice Act. Previously was called, you keep saying juveniles, so I'm trying to chase in my mind the legislation, and I think it's back 2 pieces of legislation. So we had the Juvenile Delinquents Act. Don't ask me the date when it was replaced. So it's been replaced a number of times. What we now have is what's called the YCJA, so the Youth Criminal Justice Act. And the Youth Criminal Justice Act is what governs any person between the ages of 12 and 18 who's arrested for a criminal offense. And the way the law treats youth is far different from how it treats adults. The sentences are capped depending on what someone is convicted of.
Okay.
At far lesser degrees than the sentences that adults face, which is often why youth are sort of persuaded to engage in this conduct. They're told it won't matter. They're told, don't worry, it'll never be on your record, which isn't true. They're told that the sentences are more lenient. You're unlikely to go to jail, which for a first offense is very true. So there's a great difference between them. So, for example, a youth who would just be arrested on a carjacking where no one is shot, no one is killed, their maximum sentence would be 3 years. And of that 3 years, 2/3 would be spent in custody and 1 year on community supervision. And that's the maximum. So that's someone who's a repeat offender. That's someone who has been caught before, someone who has a criminal record.
That is maximum.
That's maximum. Significantly different.
Okay. Just to better understand that, let's say a youth or a juvenile with a possession of illegal weapon versus an adult.
So again, the maximum sentence for youth on a firearm possession case would be 3 years.
Okay.
Again, maximum. They can't get, and it takes a lot. You'd have to be a repeat offender on the same offense to get 3 years. An adult, on your first offense, you would, again, there's some exceptional circumstances where people can serve their sentences at home, but on average, you'd be looking at a 2 to 3 year sentence on a first offense as a starting point. On a second or subsequent offense, your starting point is 5 years. One of the lawyers in my office just completed a case yesterday where he wasn't a youth, he was a young person, like in his 20s. On his third firearm offense, the Crown was seeking 9 years.
Ooh.
So compare that to a youth. If he was under the age of 18, his maximum sentence would be 3 years.
Okay.
Now, the Crown can apply to have a youth sentenced as an adult. So for certain offenses and certain offenders, there's that availability. I fought a case this summer in which I had a young person, 17 years old, killed his mother's boyfriend in front of his mother. It was a horrible, horrible
With a gun?
set of facts. Yeah, shot him
Okay.
to death. So he was convicted of second-degree murder, and the Crown was seeking an adult sentence for him. Wanted life in jail with no parole for 10 years. And so we had to fight for about a year, providing medical records, psychological reports, psychiatric reports. But we're able to successfully argue for a youth sentence for him in the circumstances. And that youth sentence was 7 years, which is the maximum on a second-degree murder.
Okay.
So it's a huge, significant difference, right? Between a life sentence and 7 years, it's a huge sentence. And of that 7 years, again, it's a 2/3 split. So 4 years in custody and 3 years in community.
While you're explaining this, the one thing which stuck in my mind, that is jury or the judge actually assumed that he's not a juvenile, he's an adult.
No, the judge did not. No, judge knew that he was always treated as a youth. The Crown was seeking an adult sentence. The Crown wanted the judge to treat him like an adult. And we as a defense were arguing that no, he should be treated as a youth.
Okay.
So there are ways that the Crown can try to argue in certain circumstances that someone should be sentenced as though they're an adult even as a youth. But presumptively, youth are treated very, very different from adults.
Okay. You mentioned something about like repeat offenders. So can you give the definition what consider this as to be a repeat offender?
A repeat offender is just someone who's committed a criminal offense for a subsequent time. So a first offender is someone who's charged for the very first time.
For one crime, let's say illegal
Any
weapon.
crime.
Okay, any crime.
Any crime.
Okay.
So repeat offender just means you're repeating your criminal activity. So it's the second or subsequent offense.
So that is going to be related to the first crime. Let's say somebody's...
It doesn't need to be. So if I, I go out tomorrow when I get arrested for a gun and ultimately I get convicted of that gun and, I serve my time and I get out of jail and then I go and I rob a house. I'm a repeat offender. I've already offended once.
Okay.
An offender is considered someone who is convicted of any criminal offense.
So
It's just worse if you're committing the same crime over and over again. So if I get convicted of first gun, I'm looking at 2 to 3 years. If I go back in front of the courts and I'm charged again with another firearm, let's say 2 years later, or even a year later, it just looks worse on me because I didn't learn my lesson from the first gun. Now I'm carrying a gun the second time.
Okay.
And so now your sentence range, again, depending on what else is on your record, goes from 2 to 3 years to 5 to 6 years, because if I'm also breaching a weapons ban, that adds an extra year to my sentence. On a third offense, it's even worse, right? If you keep committing the same crime over and over again, you're telling the courts, like, I don't care what you've done to me. I don't care what you have to say to me. This is what I'm going to do. I do what I want. I don't learn my lesson. Because part of what the law aims to do for people, unsuccessfully, but that's a policy question.
Okay.
Is try to change behaviors. They want to deter people from committing further offenses. And they want to send a message to the rest of society. Like, if you carry a gun, you're going to jail, so you shouldn't carry a gun because you don't want to go to jail.
Like illegal gun, actually.
Illegal gun. Well, listen, even if, like I said, if you're a legal gun owner, you cannot walk around in public with a gun.
Yeah.
This is in Florida.
Okay. So according to you, in your personal opinion, what is the biggest challenge as of right now when it comes to Canadian criminal law?
What do you mean by challenge?
For like, when I say challenge, it means the increase in the crimes as of today.
Oh, so that's a challenge to police.
Okay.
To try to correct.
Okay.
I mean, my biggest challenge right now is getting bail for people charged with a gun, because despite what you hear in the media, it's actually quite difficult to get people out on bail. So my biggest challenge is getting people back out on bail when they're accused of firearm offenses. That's not a challenge to society. A challenge to the public, policing, I imagine, is to try to control the proliferation of gun violence, carjacking, robberies, everything you said. That's we've seen an increase from. And I think the only thing that we really haven't touched on is also the proliferation of fentanyl and opioids. What that is doing in society is frightening. It's frightening. It permeates,
Like the hard drugs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the opioids especially. I think that cocaine is still prevalent and it always will be, but I think that when we pass by some of these safe injection sites and see what the opioid epidemic is doing to people, it's truly frightening. And that is something that has increased. Again, I don't do statistics for a living, but in my practice, for sure, it's quadrupled since the pandemic.
I think it might be related to that government is doing something when it comes to hard drugs as well, because in BC, they have legalized some hard drugs.
And it's been horrible. The effect of legalization, BC is now reversing.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because it's not helping people. We're enabling people.
Last two questions.
Yes.
These are my personal. And I asked everyone, okay?
Oh, you can ask. Go ahead.
Perfect.
Yes.
So first of all,
Yes.
if you have to give one advice to your younger self,
Yes.
what that one advice will be?
I think it would be to be patient and spend more time. Well, when you say younger self, what age?
Up to you.
I have different messages depending on which decade I'd be speaking to myself.
Let's talk about you as a 10-year.
As 10 years old?
Yep.
Oh, wow. So 10 years old, I hadn't even started getting into trouble yet. I would tell my 10-year-old self to listen to my mother more.
Okay, then let's say 10 until 18.
Oh, I was a disaster. I would have told myself to smarten up and to love myself and respect myself more.
Okay. And after, once you're adult?
I think in my 20s, I would try to assure myself that I was going to be okay and to just stay focused. I think that I got distracted a lot in my 20s. I think a lot of us do. We want those short-term, easy pleasures, and I think that I would have told myself to focus a little bit more. I think in my 30s, I would have done the opposite. My 30s, I really just focused on business, and my whole life was just spent on business. And I gave up a lot of opportunity to spend time with some people that I really cared about, and I don't have those opportunities to make up for anymore. So I think that I would have told myself to slow down, believe it or not.
Slow down from the business perspective
and look around.
Give more time to the people.
Look around a little bit. Throughout my 20s while I was building my business, I barely took vacations. If I went away for a week, it was a lot for me. I still worked while I was away. I had this mindset of just work nonstop and do everything I can to build up the business, which obviously I've done well with, but I could have paced things different. And so I think I would have told myself, like, take some pauses, look around. And that's twofold. I do that now. I go on vacation, even if it's just for, a few days at a time. I try to every, 3 or 4 months, like once a quarter, I try to take some time off.
Mm-hmm.
It helps me, first of all, just enjoy life.
Yep.
But it's also a huge reset for me, such that when I go back to work, I feel better. I'm far more productive. I've had this time to just sort of think about goals and think about where I'm heading. And it's actually made me better in business. It's made me better in law to take that time and step back and reset, mind and body. And I didn't do that for a very long time. I was so scared that I was going to miss out on, that next client or the client that needed me. Like I felt like I always had to be available, and I still do to some extent, but it's just, I shut my phone off during the night so I can actually sleep. I used to be available to people 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and it's not healthy. I burnt out like that, and I needed to take that time. So I think that I would want myself to, instead of, putting in 100% to the business, I could have scaled it back to 90.
Okay.
And had that 10% where I was actually, enjoying life in a more meaningful way.
Okay. Do you know why I ask these questions to everyone?
Yeah, tell me.
Okay. Because this helped me to understand that how much they think about themselves. So as you give your answer, I don't have one answer. If somebody asks the same question for me.
Wow. That's great.
So in that case, when you explain, it means you have done a lot in your life, and you also have the interest to look back and learn from that.
Oh, yes.
So that is the message which you're giving me when you answer this question.
So interesting.
So that is the reason I ask this question to everyone, to better understand how the personality they are overall.
I think it's important. I think that, self-evaluation and re-evaluation is central. It's the only way we grow. I don't want to be the same person I was at 25. I'm 45 years old.
Exactly.
I don't want to live the same. I don't want to think the same. I don't want to do the same. And it's not because I look down on how I was, but I think that life is about progressing, and it's about learning, and I'm still learning. I think the older I get, the more I realize how much I don't know.
You have the wisdom. The other day I was talking with my sister, so I don't know, some conversation happened, and she's like, you know what, that individual mentioned you are changed. I was like, okay, then it's a good thing.
Yeah.
You changed. You're no longer the same person. It's a good thing.
It's fabulous.
Yeah.
That's how we progress. That's how we grow.
Second question.
Yes.
If you have only 24 hours of your life,
Yes.
how you gonna use those 24 hours?
Oh. If I only have 24 hours,
Yep.
I am expressing my love and appreciation for those who are closest to me. And I am hopping on a plane, and I'm flying to the Cayman Islands for one last jet ski ride.
Okay.
And I'm going to end it with a fabulous meal, beachside for sure, and just enjoy the peace and tranquility.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that for me is probably my greatest and most favorited meditation. I love speed, as you know, you mentioned I love cars. Yep. I love anything fast. And so for me, there's something so freeing about being on, a jet ski by yourself in the ocean under the sun. That's about as deep in nature as I like to get, but that for me is my favorite reset for sure.
Okay. I believe that's it then.
Okay. Thanks again for having me on your show.
Perfect. So how do you feel that?
It was a great chat. It was interesting. I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know what direction we were heading in. I do a lot of podcasts. Oftentimes they're focused on giving advice to lawyers, law students. I'm often asked to speak to. A lot of people will have me on to talk about, business and growth and development. And this was a little bit everything. It was, law and very specific fact scenarios, which are always fun to chat about, and doesn't have to be about my cases, which is great. And then a little bit of life and some life lessons. So
Perfect.
this was fabulous. Thank you so much.
I'm glad that you like it.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And for coming at the Lush Podcast.
Thank you. I'm so glad we can make this happen.
Definitely. I hope this discussion sparks a new perspective for you. Before we go, I want to hear from you what stood out the most in this episode. Do you still think our legal system is as fair as it claims to be? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for tuning in, and do subscribe to Avilash Podcast.